When was the last time you made something? Not because you had to, not to meet a deadline, not for anyone else, not because it was on your to-do list, but because it just called to you. If you're struggling to remember, definitely listen to this episode because somewhere along the way, most of us decided that creativity was a luxury we couldn't afford. And we strayed from a lot of the things that used to make us feel alive. So I want to talk to that today. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. I talk to women almost every day in my coaching practice about something that comes up again and again. There's a very common thread here in the conversations that I have, which is kind of a quiet grief around creativity. So they often tell me that they don't have time for their creative pursuits, the things that used to really bring them a lot of joy. So they tell me that they used to paint or write or dance or sew or play music back before life got so full. They talk about watching someone else's creativity work and feeling that bittersweet mix of admiration and longing mixed in with a little bit of regret. That I wish I could do that feeling has become so familiar, it almost doesn't register anymore. And then almost apologetically, they say, but I'm just not that creative. Right? Or that was a different phase of my life, a different season of my life. And every time I hear that, I want to gently but firmly push back, because here's what I know to be true. No human is uncreative, but there are lots of humans who are out of practice with being creative. Creativity is not a personality trait that you have or don't have. It's something that you spend time on or you don't. And as I'm always saying, the beautiful thing about practicing anything, is it atrophies when you stop showing up, but it amplifies when you do. So why do we stop? How does it happen that by midlife, so many of us have quietly let go of the creative pursuits that once gave us so much life? Well, I want to offer that I think a few things are at play. Of course, first, busyness. By midlife, most of us are carrying a staggering amount of to-dos. We have the careers, the relationships, the families, the aging parents, the health challenges. The list is long. No one's denying that. And the demands are very real. So creativity kind of gets squeezed out. It's something that you'll do when life gets less busy, when the list gets shorter. But the list never gets shorter. If you wait for the perfect window, it never opens. The other thing at play, I think, is identity. By midlife, we've largely decided who we are. I think it even starts earlier in life. I see this happening in my 16-year-old. I feel like sometimes he's already decided who he is. And there's a level of confidence around that I love. And then there's a level of fear where I'm like, hey, buddy, don't do that to yourself. Don't decide so hard who you are that you don't continue to experiment and taste new things. And I think by midlife, a lot of times we are doing exactly that. We have curated a really powerful story about ourselves, whether it's, helping us live the life we want or not. And if that story doesn't include, I'm a creative person, then of course creative pursuits start to feel awkward and hard and disorienting, almost embarrassing, like we're pretending to be something we're not. And I think the third thing that comes into play is the obsession with outcome. Of course, the modern world rewards productivity and output. So when we sit down to create something that we're really going to be messy and imperfect with, we immediately start judging ourselves, right? Like, is it good enough? Will anyone care? What's the point if it's not going anywhere? And that kind of thinking is the fastest way to kill the creative impulse before it even gets started. So I was teaching Consistency Code, the book that I wrote last year. I was teaching the concepts and the framework of the Consistency Code a decade before I ever sat down to write that book. And once I sat down, it took a long time. 5 years. And I didn't do it to make money. Nobody writes a book to make money. I mean, unless you're, a really well-known author who puts out a new book like every month, maybe. But I think when it comes to writing, people write for one of two reasons. They love writing, or they're so devoted to the message and mission of the book, they're going to write it regardless of what's on the other side. And I really felt that writing my book. First of all, I do enjoy writing, so that was a perk. But I also, and I said this to so many people in my close circle from the outset of writing the book, when people said, what do you hope happens on the other side? My answer was always the same. Honestly, I don't really care. Of course I want people to read it. Of course I hope it impacts people. But I felt so compelled to write it, so compelled to have the message out there, that I was just going to show up every day, devoted to it until it crossed the finish line. I wasn't attached to the outcome. I was attached to having it exist. And that distinction, I think, between creating for the outcome and creating for the process or to the devotion of whatever it is you're creating is everything. Because when you create only for outcome, you're always measuring, always evaluating, always one step removed from the actual experience of living. And ladies, we do not need more of that. When you create because something in you demands to be expressed, because the work itself has value, regardless of where it lands, something completely different happens. You come alive in a way that almost nothing else can replicate. So let's just briefly touch on what the research tells us, because this isn't just my philosophy. There are real measurable health benefits to creative expression. Studies have found that engaging in creative activities is associated with reduced cortisol, lower rates of depression and anxiety, improved immune function, and greater overall life satisfaction. The act of making something, anything, activates the brain's reward system in ways that are genuinely restorative. And this is really important, especially on the back of what we talked about yesterday, how the nervous system is so exploited by a market that is almost banking on your depletion. And so we start reaching for things that artificially alter our chemistry to make us feel better. But art or creative endeavors don't artificially alter your chemistry. They genuinely alter your chemistry. And there's also something powerful that happens to our sense of self when we create. We stop being purely consumers of content, of other people's ideas, of the endless scroll, and we become creators, makers. And that shift in identity has a very quiet but profound effect on how we move through the world. And another perk that the research is always pointing to around creativity is that it helps keep the brain engaged, flexible, growing, learning a creative new skill, tackling a new creative challenge. In some ways, those are the most potent forms of exercise available to us. Right? Not crossword puzzles, not passive consumption, active, expressive making of things. So let's reframe this a little bit, because I think the word creativity sometimes feels too big, too loaded, too tied to talent and output. What if instead we just looked at it as devotion to something? Devotion to the part of you that has something to express. Devotion to the pursuits that make you feel exceptionally alive, most like yourself, most connected to something way bigger than your to-do list. Maybe that is painting or writing or dancing, but it could also look like gardening or cooking something really beautiful or rearranging your living space or building something with your hands. Creativity is not confined to the arts. It is any act of bringing something into being that didn't exist there before, and doing it because the making, the creating itself matters. You don't have to be good at it. You don't have to share it. You don't have to monetize it or justify it or explain it. Many of the women that I work with who are really thriving in midlife, the ones who have the most energy, most patience, the most genuine joy, almost universally have a creative practice of some kind. And I don't think that's a coincidence. They don't treat creativity as an extra thing to do when everything else is handled. It is one of the things literally that helps them to handle everything else. It replenishes them. It reminds them of who they are underneath all the roles and responsibilities. It puts the life back into your life. So, a little plea to you at the end of this: do not wait until you have more time. Don't wait until you're better at it. Don't wait until it feels less self-indulgent. Make something today. Even something small, something just for you. That's how you return to creativity. You start to practice. One ask before you go. This show is 6 months in, these daily drops. Obviously, the show's been around a lot longer than that. I think we're going on our 11th or 12th year. But the daily drops have been happening for 6 months and still going strong. But that only continues if it's reaching the people who need it. So if today landed for you, share it with one woman in your life who you think could maybe benefit from it. That's it, just one. Maybe consider leaving a review, right? It matters more than you know, and thank you in advance. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.